Welcome to Better Every Day. I'm Tom, here with my co-host Kelly, and we're all about turning the best self-improvement books into simple, actionable steps to help you grow and thrive. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon if you're on YouTube so you never miss an episode. All right, let's jump in and get better every day.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a book that's practically a rite of passage in the personal finance world. It's by Robert Kiyosaki, and honestly, one of the things that I think makes it so enduring is the way he tells the story.
I know, right? It's not just a dry how-to manual. He weaves in his own experiences growing up with these two father figures. His biological dad, the poor dad.
Highly educated, worked hard his whole life, but always seemed to struggle financially, right?
Exactly. And then there's the rich dad, his friend's father, who had this whole other outlook on money. And that's where the real lessons start coming in.
Yeah. And it wasn't just about making more money. It was about, like you said, a whole different perspective.
Yeah.
He wanted Kiyosaki to understand how the system works, right? How to make money work for you. It's not something you usually hear in traditional financial advice.
Definitely not. It's more like, get a good job, save your pennies, that kind of thing.
Right. And Kiyosaki has this really great anecdote about asking his poor dad how to get rich, and the answer he gets, just use your head.
Oh, I remember that one. So vague.
Totally. And it kind of highlights how so many of us never get practical guidance when it comes to money.
Which is where Rich Dad, Poor Dad really shines, I think. It gives you this framework. Goes beyond just working hard and saving.
Okay, so let's jump into some of those big lessons that Kiyosaki learns from Rich Dad. One that really struck me was the whole idea of assets versus liabilities. I mean, we're basically raised to believe our house is our biggest asset.
And that's exactly what Rich Dad turns upside down. It's one of the core principles of the book, actually. An asset, according to him, puts money in your pocket, while a liability takes it out.
So a house, especially if you have a mortgage, is more of a liability because you're constantly paying out for the mortgage, taxes, repairs.
Exactly. It really is a mindset shift.
For sure. And you know what else it made me think of? That other big idea from the book, minding your own business.
Yeah, he's not saying everyone needs to go become an entrepreneur or something. It's more about building assets, creating income separate from your job.
So things like rental properties, dividend-paying stocks, maybe even writing an ebook or creating an online course. Those could all be assets.
Exactly. Building that financial security that goes beyond just relying on a paycheck. Because, as we all know, job security isn't really what it used to be.
So true, especially these days. A lot of people have been laid off, seen companies downsize. Having that extra cushion can make a huge difference.
Huge. And Kiyosaki's point is, you don't have to wait to build those income streams. He shares his own story about working at Xerox while building his asset column at the same time.
Shows you it's possible, even with a 9-to-5.
Right.
Which I think brings us to another really important part of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the emphasis on financial literacy. Kiyosaki's pretty clear that he thinks traditional education doesn't really prepare us to handle money.
It's interesting, though, he doesn't just blame the education system. He also talks about how, as a society, we're almost conditioned to shy away from wealth, from really pursuing financial independence.
Like we're supposed to be happy with a steady job and a 401k. Anything beyond that is almost taboo.
Yeah, like it's somehow greedy or unattainable.
He even has this anecdote about a woman playing his cash flow board game. You know the one I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, the one who gets so overwhelmed by the numbers she just shuts down.
That's it. And it really shows how that lack of financial literacy can hold people back, not because they're not smart, but because they just haven't been given the tools to understand how it all works.
Yeah, he actually even says that the reason he created that board game in the first place was to help people get more comfortable with those concepts, you know, in a fun way.
I mean, it makes sense. Like you wouldn't hand someone the keys to a car without teaching them how to drive.
Exactly. And he tells the story of this really successful business owner playing the cash flow game who said he never really thought he needed to understand those concepts because he could just hire people to take care of that side of things.
Yeah, but Kiyosaki's point is that you still need that basic understanding to make informed decisions, oversee your finances, even if you're not doing every little thing yourself.
Right, to make sure you're not being taken advantage of, to be able to spot opportunities, to really feel in control.
It all goes back to minding your own business, doesn't it? If you're building these income-generating assets, you have to understand how they work, how to make smart choices about them.
Absolutely. It's about working smart, not just hard, developing that financial intelligence.
And I think that's what Rich Dad, Poor Dad is all about at its core. awakening that financial genius that Kiyosaki believes we all have inside of us, questioning the status quo, seeking out that knowledge that can empower you.
Empower you to create a life of, freedom and abundance.
So much more than just a personal finance book, isn't it?
It really is. It's a whole mindset shift.
Okay, so we've covered assets versus liabilities, minding your own business, and the importance of financial literacy. Where do we go from here? What are some of the actual strategies that Rich Dad lays out for putting those ideas into action?
That's where things get really interesting. We'll dive into the specifics of how to acquire assets, manage debt, and create a financial system that actually works for you, not against you.
Sounds like we're just getting started.
So, are you ready to put some of these Rich Dad principles into action? Let's get specific about those assets Kiyosaki talks about. He's really big on businesses that don't need you there all the time,
I think that's like the dream for a lot of people, owning a business that kind of runs itself. What are some examples of that type of asset?
Well, think about a rental property, right? It generates passive income. Or an online business that's, pretty much automated. The idea is you free up your time and energy so you can focus on building other income streams.
It's not just about making money, it's about having that freedom and control over your time.
Exactly. And another thing he talks about is stocks, especially in smaller companies, startups, that kind of thing.
He even mentions taking companies public. That sounds pretty intense.
It is. And he's upfront about the fact that there's more risk involved with smaller companies. But he also emphasizes doing your research, really understanding the business, the market you're investing in. It's about making educated decisions, not just gambling.
So it's not just throwing money at anything, it's about having a strategy. Like, he talks about aiming to be out of a stock within a year, but with real estate, he's more focused on holding and trading up.
Right. Having that plan helps you stay disciplined, and it keeps you from getting emotional about your investments. That's where people make mistakes, getting caught up in the hype.
Okay, so we've got stocks, businesses. What about real estate? Rich Dad seems pretty keen on owning property as an investment.
Oh, he definitely is. He sees real estate as this powerful way to build wealth, especially if you leverage the tax advantages that come with it. He even talks about something called a 1031 exchange. Basically, it's a way to defer paying taxes on capital gains when you sell a property if you reinvest that money into another property.
Hold on, break that down for me. What does it mean to defer taxes, and how does that help you in the long run?
It's like hitting the pause button on your tax bill, basically. Instead of paying those taxes right away, you roll them over into your next investment property. So your money keeps working for you, and you don't have to pay those taxes until later. It can really speed up how quickly you build wealth.
Okay, yeah, I see how that could be a big deal. But real estate just feels like this huge hurdle for a lot of people. It's a big commitment, and even knowing where to start can be intimidating.
And Rich Dad gets that. He's not saying you have to go out and buy a skyscraper right away. Start small, build up your portfolio as you gain more knowledge and confidence. He talks about starting with a small condo in Hawaii, for example.
Which he got for a steal, if I remember correctly, and then use the income from that to buy more. It's all about taking those first steps, even if they seem small.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to get over that fear of taking the first step is to develop your financial literacy. That's what Rich Dad Poor Dad is all about. Giving you those tools to analyze deals, understand cash flow, make good decisions.
You mentioned cash flow. That seems to be another one of those core concepts in the book. It goes hand in hand with the whole assets versus liabilities thing, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. Kiyosaki is always talking about how important it is to understand where your money's going, how it's flowing in and out of your life. He uses those diagrams, remember?
Oh, yeah, those were super helpful.
Yeah.
They really show you how building assets can create this positive cash flow, like this cycle where the money's working for you instead of the other way around.
Exactly. And speaking of creating systems, have you ever heard of the concept of paying yourself first? It can sound kind of counterintuitive at first.
I know, right? Like,
Yeah.
how can you save and invest when you have all these bills to pay? It felt kind of irresponsible almost when I first heard about it.
It is a mindset shift, for sure. Rich Dad isn't saying you should ignore your obligations, but he wants you to think about the long game.
So it's not about ignoring those immediate needs. It's about recognizing that building assets, generating that passive income, that's what ultimately gives you more security than just working harder and paying bills.
Exactly. And one of the easiest ways to stick to that pay yourself first principle is to automate it. Set up automatic transfers from your checking to your savings or investment account. That way, the money's gone before you even have a chance to spend it.
Such a good tip. It takes the thinking and the temptation out of it. And speaking of taking action, Rich Dad is all about being proactive when it comes to building wealth. He doesn't just want you to learn about money. He wants you to go out and do something with that knowledge.
He wants you to make offers, negotiate deals, not be afraid to lose. He even talks about putting escape clauses in agreements so you can minimize the risk.
Escape clauses. Can you give me an example of what that would look like, maybe in a real estate deal?
Sure. Let's say you're buying a rental property. You could put in an escape clause that lets you back out if the home inspection finds some major problems with the house. Like structural issues or something.
So you're protecting yourself while still going after what you want. It's about taking risks, but calculated ones.
Right. And he tells this funny story about using his cat as a business partner in a real estate deal, just to show how ridiculous some of that legal jargon can be.
I love that story. It's a good reminder not to take things too seriously, to have a little fun with it. But it also shows how important it is to understand the legal side of things, too.
Definitely. And that's why he's such a big believer in having a good team of advisors, professionals who can guide you, attorneys, accountants, brokers.
So it's not just about the money itself. It's about the relationships you build, the people you surround yourself with.
For sure. It's about leveraging their expertise, finding people who can help you navigate those complexities. As much as Rich Dad Poor Dad is about strategy and financial knowledge, there's this other layer that I think is just as important, and it might even be the most challenging part.
Okay, I'm curious. What is it?
It's the whole human element, overcoming laziness, building self-discipline. That's where a lot of people get tripped up, even when they have the knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. It's so easy to get sidetracked, to put those big goals on the back burner when life gets busy.
It's human nature, right? But Kiyosaki doesn't sugarcoat it. He calls it out. He talks about how powerful laziness can be, but also how to harness, a little bit of greed as motivation.
That's the part that kind of threw me off at first. How do you interpret that in a way that feels, ethical, like not just being greedy for the sake of it?
Right. He's definitely not saying you should be ruthless or take advantage of people. It's more about tapping into that desire for something better for yourself, for your family, that drive to create a life you really want.
So it's about turning that wanting into action, into fuel for actually doing the work.
Exactly. And once you have that fire lit, you need to keep it going. And that's where self-discipline comes in, which, let's be real, can be a struggle for most of us.
For sure. Any practical tips from Rich Dad on how to stay on track?
He's big on having a strong why. Really defining what you're working towards, what those financial goals will allow you to do, how your life will be different.
So constantly reminding yourself why you're making the effort, especially when it gets tough.
Yeah. It's so easy to lose sight of that bigger picture when you're just dealing with the day-to-day grind.
And what about systems? Does he talk about creating systems to help with that consistency?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the best examples is that pay yourself first concept. It might sound familiar, we've touched on it before, but it's so powerful, I think it's worth repeating.
Definitely. For anyone just tuning in, can you give us a quick refresher on what that means?
Basically, it's about making your savings and investments a priority, not an afterthought. Instead of waiting to see what's left over after you pay your bills, treat those savings like any other essential expense, something you have to pay every month.
So automate those transfers into your savings or investment account.
Right, exactly. That way, the money's already working for you. You don't even have to think about it.
And it all adds up over time, especially when you factor in compounding.
Huge, which is another reason why he's such a big advocate for starting early. The sooner you start investing, the more time your money has to grow.
It's like that old saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Love that. And it's so true when it comes to building wealth, one step at a time, building those good habits.
And remembering that it's a marathon, not a sprint. There will be bumps in the road.
Oh, for sure. But having that strong why, that support system, that's what helps you get through those tough times.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad has definitely given us a lot to think about. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with as we wrap up our deep dive?
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all this, but I think the biggest takeaway is that financial success really is achievable for anyone. It's not about how much money you have right now. It's about building that financial intelligence, taking action, and never giving up on your dreams.
It's about shifting your mindset, believing in your ability to create the life you want, even if it takes time.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone. There are resources, communities, mentors out there to support you on your journey.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad is definitely a great place to start. So much more than just a personal finance book. It's a blueprint for taking control of your financial future.
Exactly. And we hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and inspiration to get started or to keep going on your own path to financial freedom.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We'll see you on our next deep dive.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Better Every Day. We hope you found some actionable insights to help you on your self-improvement journey. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on future deep dives. And if you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, small steps every day lead to big changes. See you next time.